7 years ago, Kang Jae-Min made a choice. He stood in Amani Brook's doorway, rain soaking through his coat, and said the words that would haunt him forever. "Loving me will ruin you." Then he walked away, never looked back, built an empire on the principle that looking back invited weakness. And weakness got people killed. He became untouchable, a shadow king who controlled Korea's underworld from glass towers. Men feared him. Politicians obeyed him. Enemies disappeared. At 43, he had everything, except the woman he'd loved, except the life they might have built, except the words she'd been trying to say the night he left. "I'm pregnant." She never got to tell him. He walked out too fast. Number changed too quickly. Disappeared too completely. So Amani made her own choice. She'd raised them alone. Aya and Eli. Twins. Born with their father's eyes. Those unusual golden brown eyes that made people stop and stare and ask questions she couldn't answer. Where did they get those eyes? They don't look like anyone else. Who's their father? She'd smile. Change the subject. Protect the secret that protected them. Because if Kang Jae-Min's enemies knew he had children, those children would be leverage. Targets. Weapons. So she kept them hidden. For 7 years. Until a Tuesday in Los Angeles, when fate decided secrets don't stay buried. When 2 children ran through a hotel lobby laughing. When one of them bumped into a man in an expensive suit. When that man looked down and saw eyes he recognized. His own. Staring back at him from a 6-year-old face. And everything Jae-Min thought he'd left behind came crashing into his present. 2 children. 1 woman. 7 years of choices. All colliding in a moment that proved one devastating truth. You can abandon people, but you can't abandon consequences. If you're still watching right now, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Subscribe to our channel for stories that can make you smile and can also make you cry for absolute strangers. Now, let's get into the story. Kang Jae-Min learned at 19 that hesitation gets people killed. His father taught him that lesson with a bullet. Not aimed at Jae-Min, aimed at the man who'd hesitated half a second too long during a negotiation. The body hit the floor. His father looked at him. "Do you understand?" Jae-Min understood. By 25, he'd perfected the art of not feeling. By 30, he built an empire on that foundation. By 43, he wasn't just powerful. He was inevitable. His name never appeared in police files. His face never appeared in court documents. In public, he was a Korean billionaire investor with impeccable tailoring and calculated smiles. Shook hands with politicians. Donated to charities. Attended galas where people called him philanthropist and believed it. In private, he was the final decision. The man who decided who lived, who disappeared, who got mercy, and who got examples made of them. People begged. Cried. Offered everything. He listened with the same expression he used for weather reports. Then made his decision. And never thought about them again. That's how he survived. By not looking back. By not allowing the past to have weight. By convincing himself that every choice he'd made was necessary. Strategic. The cost of building something that couldn't be touched. He lived alone at the top of glass towers. Penthouse in Seoul. Apartment in Tokyo. Property in Singapore. Each one pristine. Minimal. Sterile as operating rooms. No photos. No personal items. Nothing that suggested a human with attachments lived there. His staff knew better than to ask questions. His security knew better than to make eye contact unless necessary. His business partners knew better than to assume friendship meant anything beyond utility. He had money that could buy countries. Connections that could topple governments. Power that made men twice his size shrink. And at night, when the city slept below him, he'd pour whiskey he barely tasted and tell himself this was enough. This was success. This was what winning looked like. Sometimes, rarely, but sometimes he'd remember her. Amani. The woman with eyes that saw past his armor. The woman who'd made him laugh. Actually laugh. The woman who'd asked him once, in the early days, "What do you want that money can't buy?" He'd had no answer. She'd smiled sadly. That's the problem. He'd walked away from her 7 years ago, told himself it was protection, that his enemies would have used her, that loving him would have painted a target on her back she didn't deserve, that leaving was mercy. He'd convinced himself of that, repeated it until it sounded like truth. And he never looked back, never allowed himself to wonder what might have been, never let himself calculate the cost of that choice. Because looking back was weakness, and weakness got people killed. So Kang Jae-Min kept moving forward, building, expanding, conquering, surviving. He survived corporate wars, survived assassination attempts, survived betrayals from people he'd trusted, survived everything. Or so he thought. Until Los Angeles. Until a hotel lobby. Until 2 children ran past him, and one of them had eyes that proved some things survive even when you walk away. Some consequences don't care if you look back. They grow anyway. And sometimes the thing you survived wasn't survival at all. It was abandonment. And abandonment has a way of finding you. Even 7 years later. Even when you've convinced yourself you left nothing behind. Even when you're standing at the top of the world. Consequences don't care about power. They just wait. And when they're ready, they run through hotel lobbies with your eyes. And destroy everything you thought you'd built. Amani Brooks was never supposed to happen. Jae-Min had rules.
No attachments. No vulnerabilities.
No one close enough to be used as leverage. For 15 years, those rules kept him alive. Then he met her at an international art showcase in Busan. She was volunteering, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back, arguing politely with a vendor about mislabeled paintings. He'd attended under an alias. Another tedious networking event among donors with fake smiles. He'd planned to stay an hour, leave unnoticed, forget it happened. Instead, he stood there watching a woman who didn't know who he was treat a vendor with more respect than most people showed their equals. When she noticed him staring, she didn't flirt, didn't perform, just asked, "Do you actually care about art or are you here for the tax write-off?"
No one talked to him like that.
No one dared.
I'm deciding, he said.
Well, decide faster. You're blocking the Monet. He moved. She smiled. Thank you. Now, what do you actually think of this piece? She pointed at a painting he glanced at and dismissed. But she was waiting. Actually waiting for his opinion. Like it mattered. So he looked. Really looked. It's technically proficient, but emotionally empty. The artist knows how to paint. They don't know why. Her smile widened. Exactly. Finally, someone who sees it. That's how it started. A conversation about art that became coffee. Coffee that became walks along the waterfront. Walks that became late nights where they talked about everything except who he really was. She never asked. Maybe she didn't care. Maybe she knew and chose ignorance. Either way, Amani didn't treat him like a weapon. Didn't flinch when he went silent. Didn't perform for him. She was warmth where he was ice. Laughter where he was silence. Questions where others offered only agreement. What do you want that money can't buy? She'd ask once. He'd had no answer. She'd touched his face. That's what I thought. You're so busy building walls you forgot to build a door. Their relationship stayed hidden. Not because she demanded it. She would have walked beside him publicly. Would have faced whatever came. But Jae-Min knew his world better than she did. Knew his enemies would have seen her. Studied her. Found the ways she mattered. And used her. Leverage. Hostage. Weapon. That's what love became in his world. A liability. A weakness. A target. So they met in secret. Her apartment. His car. Places his security didn't monitor. Stolen hours that felt more real than anything in his empire. And somewhere between the 3rd month and the 6th, Jae-Min realized he was falling. Not the careful, controlled interest he'd felt for women before. Not the transactional relationships that served purposes. Falling. Deeply. Irrevocably. The kind of falling that meant she could destroy him. That loving her was the most dangerous thing he'd ever done. More dangerous than any deal. Any enemy. Any war. Because enemies he could eliminate. Deals he could control. Wars he could win. But love? Love made you vulnerable. made you hesitate, made you imagine futures that had no place in his world. He told himself he'd end it, told himself daily. Then she'd smile, or touch his hand, or say something that made him remember what it felt like to be human instead of just powerful.
And he'd stay.
One more day, one more week, one more month, until the night his enemies moved, until the threat became real, until staying meant risking her life. That's when Jae-Min made the choice. Not because he stopped loving her, but because he loved her too much to watch her become collateral. So he stood in her doorway, rain pouring, and said the words that would haunt him forever. This ends tonight. Loving me will ruin you. She tried to stop him. Wait, but he'd already decided. Already walked away. Already convinced himself it was mercy. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known because he left too fast, was that mercy had consequences. And consequences were already growing. 2 of them. Amani had been practicing the words all day. Standing in front of the mirror. Trying different tones. Different approaches. I'm pregnant. Too clinical. We're having a baby. Too cheerful for what this meant. I need to tell you something important. Too vague. By the time Jae-Min arrived at 9 p.m., she'd settled on simple honesty. She'd tell him. He'd react. They'd figure it out together. Except he walked in already wearing the expression she'd learned to fear. Distant. Decided. Gone before he'd even arrived. We need to talk, he said. I know. I need to tell you. I'm ending this. Tonight.
Now.
The words hit like glass shattering. What? This.
Us.
It's over. She searched his face for softness. Found none. Why? Because my enemies know about you. They're watching. Waiting. And the moment they decide you're valuable, you become a target I can't protect. So protect me. We'll figure it out. There's no figuring this out. There's only you dying because you were stupid enough to love me. The cruelty was intentional. She knew that. Knew he was pushing her away. Trying to make her hate him so leaving would hurt less. I don't believe you. You're scared. That's different from, I'm not scared.
I'm smart.
And smart men don't give their enemies leverage. I'm not leverage. You're a vulnerability. A weakness. A mistake I'm correcting before it costs lives. She stepped toward him. He stepped back. Don't make this harder than it is. Harder? You're throwing away everything we built because you're afraid. I'm throwing away a complication. That's all you are. All you've ever been. The lie was so practiced it almost sounded true. Almost. You don't mean that.
Ido.
This was temporary.
You knew that.
Don't pretend it was more. Jae-Min, goodbye, Amani. He turned toward the door. This was it. The moment she'd rehearsed. The moment she'd planned.
Wait. I need to tell you something.
Please. He stopped. Hand on the door.
She took a breath.
Opened her mouth.
He spoke first.
Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. We're done. Completely.
Don't contact me. Don't look for me.
Forget this happened. Then he walked out. The door closed. The rain swallowed his footsteps. And Amani stood in her apartment, hand pressed to her stomach, and screamed the words into empty air. I'm pregnant. The walls absorbed it. The rain drowned it. And somewhere in Seoul, Jae-Min climbed into his car, told his driver to take him home, and convinced himself he'd made the right choice. He didn't know. Couldn't have known. That 20 feet behind him, through walls and rain and the space he'd created, Amani was collapsing, sliding down the door, crying so hard she couldn't breathe, because she'd tried. She'd tried to tell him. And he'd walked away too fast. 3 days later, his number stopped working. She called 47 times.
Deadline.
Every time. She tried his office. His assistant said he was unavailable. Indefinitely. She tried the gallery where they'd met. The woman who'd introduced them said she hadn't seen him. Didn't know how to reach him. Jae-Min had disappeared. Completely. Intentionally. The way only someone with resources could disappear. And Amani sat alone in her apartment, staring at a positive pregnancy test, and realized he was gone. And she was alone. And something was growing inside her that he'd never know about. That's when she made her decision. The decision that would shape everything. He didn't want her?
Fine.
He didn't want complications?
Fine.
He didn't want vulnerability or leverage or weakness.
Fine.
Then he wouldn't get to know about this. She'd keep it, raise it, protect it, alone. Because if Jaemin's world was too dangerous for her, it was definitely too dangerous for a child. So she'd build a different world. A safer one. One where his enemies couldn't reach. One where his name didn't matter. One where she was enough.
She had to be.
Because no one else was coming. 2 weeks later, she went to the doctor for the first appointment. Sat on the examination table. Waited for confirmation. The doctor smiled. Pointed at the screen. Congratulations. You're having twins.
Twins.
Not one complication.
2.
Not one consequence.
2.
Not one life that would have his eyes, his features, his genetics.
2.
Amani stared at the screen. At the 2 tiny heartbeats. At the proof that the night Jaemin walked away, he didn't just leave her. He left them. And he'd never know. She'd make sure of it. Amani sat on the edge of the hospital bed, hands shaking, staring at the ultrasound image the doctor had just handed her. 2 shadows. 2 heartbeats. 2 futures she'd have to build alone. Twins, the doctor said again, smiling like this was good news. Like discovering you were carrying 2 lives when you could barely afford to feed yourself was cause for celebration. It's early, but they're both healthy. Strong heartbeats. You're about 7 weeks along. 7 weeks. That meant conception was the last night. The night before he left. The night he'd held her like he was memorizing her. Like he already knew he was leaving. Do you have support? The doctor asked. Family? The father? Amani's throat closed.
No.
Just me. That's all right. Plenty of women do this alone. You'll be fine. But Amani wasn't thinking about being fine. She was thinking about how a man who never looked back had somehow left behind the most permanent thing possible. 2 children. 2 lives. 2 tiny humans who'd grow up with his face and never know his name. She tried one more time. One last attempt before accepting the truth. She called the number she'd memorized.
Deadline.
She called his office. Mr. Kang is no longer available through this line. Please contact our main switchboard. She called the main switchboard. I'm sorry, we have no one by that name in our directory. He'd erased himself.
Completely.
Like he'd never existed. Like their 6 months together had been a dream she'd woken from. Like she'd imagined the man who'd made her laugh, made her feel seen, made her believe love was worth the risk. Except she hadn't imagined him. Because 2 heartbeats on a screen proved he'd been real. That night, Amani sat alone in her apartment and made the decision that would define the next 7 years. He would never know. Not because she was angry. Not because she wanted revenge. But because his world, the world he'd walked away to protect her from, was too dangerous for children. If his enemies would have used her as leverage, what would they do to twins? She imagined it. Children used as weapons. As threats. As pawns in games she didn't understand. Jaemin had said loving him would ruin her. He was right. But she wouldn't let it ruin them. So she'd keep the secret. Raise them alone. Build a life far from Seoul, far from his empire, far from anything that connected them to a father who'd chosen power over love. She sold everything. Her apartment. Her car. Everything that tied her to the city where they'd met. Moved to Los Angeles 3 months later. Started over. New name on the lease. New job. New life. When Aya and Eli were born, she held them both and whispered promises. I'll protect you. I'll love you enough for 2 parents. I'll make sure you never feel the absence. She meant it. But some absences are too big to fill. Some questions are too persistent to ignore. Why don't we have a dad? Where did our eyes come from? Did he not want us? Amani always smiled. Always deflected. Always protected them from the truth that their father had walked away before knowing they existed. That he'd chosen an empire over a family he never knew he'd made. That somewhere in the world, Kang Jae-Min was building kingdoms while his children grew up asking why they weren't enough. The secret grew with them, got heavier. Every birthday, every school event where other kids had fathers, every time Eli asked if Daddy was dead, and Amani had to decide how to answer. Not dead.
Just gone.
Not cruel. Just unknowing. Not a villain. Just a man who'd walked away too fast, and she decided too late to call him back.
7 years of that secret.
7 years of raising children alone. 7 years of seeing his eyes every morning in their faces. 7 years of wondering if she'd made the right choice. And then Los Angeles. A hotel lobby. Tuesday afternoon. Twins running ahead laughing. Amani calling after them to slow down. Not seeing the man in the expensive suit. Not recognizing him until it was too late. Until Eli bumped into him. Until the man looked down. Until recognition crossed his face like lightning. Until their eyes met and Amani's worst fear materialized. He'd found them, and everything she'd built to keep them safe was about to shatter. Aya asked first. She was 3, standing in the grocery store pointing at a man with a little boy on his shoulders. Mama, why don't we have a daddy? Amani's cart stopped. Some families have daddies. Some don't. We have each other. That's enough. But why? Because that's how our family works. Aya accepted it. For a while. Eli asked differently. He was 5.
Direct.
Unfiltered. Is our dad dead?
No.
Then where is he? Somewhere else. Why doesn't he visit? It's complicated. Did we do something bad? That question broke her.
No, baby.
You didn't do anything wrong. He doesn't know about you. Why not? Because sometimes adults make choices that change everything. And by the time they realize what they've done, it's too late to go back. Eli processed this with the seriousness only children possess. I think he'd like us if he met us. Amani's throat tightened. I think so too. But it was the eyes that made the secret impossible. People noticed. Teachers. Strangers. Other parents. Where did they get those eyes? They're so unusual. Golden brown like that. Almost amber. They don't look like you. Must be from their father. Amani smiled. Changed the subject. Deflected.
But she saw what they saw.
Aya and Eli had eyes that didn't belong to children.
Sharp.
Intense. Too knowing. Eyes that seemed to remember things they'd never experienced. Eyes that made people uncomfortable because children weren't supposed to look at the world that way. Assessing. Calculating.
Seeing.
His eyes. Meanwhile, 7,000 miles away, Kang Jae-Min was building an empire that consumed everything in its path. He bought companies that had stood for generations.
Dismantled them. Sold the pieces.
Destroyed families who'd built legacies. He did it without hesitation. Without remorse. With the same cold efficiency he used for everything. Competitors called him ruthless. Rivals called him inevitable. His own people called him untouchable. At 40, he'd consolidated power across 3 countries. At 41, he'd eliminated every threat to his position. At 42, there was no one left who dared challenge him. At 43, he sat alone in penthouses overlooking cities that bent to his will and poured whiskey he barely tasted. Sometimes, late at night, he'd think about her. Amani. The woman he'd walked away from. The woman he'd told himself he was protecting. He'd wonder if she was safe. If she'd moved on. If she ever thought about him. He never allowed himself to wonder long. Because wondering was looking back. And looking back was weakness. So he'd drink.
Sign contracts.
Plan acquisitions. Destroy anyone who threatened his empire. He attended galas where people called him philanthropist. Shook hands with politicians who owed him. Smiled for cameras that would never capture who he really was. And every night, he returned to empty spaces and told himself this was the price. Loneliness. Isolation. The absence of anything that mattered beyond power. He told himself it was worth it. That walking away from Amani had been necessary. That love was a liability he couldn't afford. That he'd made the right choice. He almost believed it. Almost convinced himself that the hollow feeling was just part of success. That everyone at the top felt this empty. That power was supposed to taste like ash. But some nights, rare but some nights, he'd pour that whiskey and wonder what she was doing. If she was happy. If she'd forgiven him. If she'd forgotten him. He never imagined she was raising his children. Never imagined 2 lives growing in Los Angeles with his eyes. Never imagined that his choice to walk away had created consequences that were learning to walk, to talk, to ask questions about a father they'd never met. Never imagined that Aya was cautious like him, observant, always watching, never trusting easily. Never imagined that Eli was bold like him, asking questions, pushing boundaries, demanding answers. Never imagined they existed. Until Los Angeles. Until a hotel lobby. Until Tuesday. Until 2 children ran past him, laughing, and he looked down into eyes that proved he hadn't walked away from everything. He'd walked away from the only things that would ever matter. And they'd grown without him. Beautiful. Strong. Alive. Completely unaware their father was a stranger standing 3 feet away. Staring. Frozen. Finally understanding what he'd lost. If you're still watching, drop a "still watching" in the comments, because this next part changes everything. Jae-Min was in Los Angeles for a merger. 3 days. Sign papers. Consolidate assets. Return to Seoul. He'd done it 100 times. Expected nothing. The hotel lobby was crowded. Business travelers. Tourists. The usual chaos of people who didn't matter. He was reviewing a contract on his phone when he heard it. Laughter. High. Bright. The kind only children make. 2 of them. Running. Playing tag, or racing, or whatever children do. He didn't look up. Children weren't his concern. Until one of them bumped into his leg. Sorry? The voice was small. Apologetic. Jae-Min looked down to wave it away. And time stopped. The boy couldn't have been more than 6. Dark curls. Brown skin. Wearing jeans and a dinosaur shirt. Looking up at him with an expression that was half apology, half curiosity. But that wasn't what froze Jae-Min. It was the eyes. Golden brown. Unusual. Sharp. Intense in a way that didn't belong on a child's face. Eyes he'd seen every morning for 43 years. His eyes. Not similar. Not reminiscent. Identical. The exact shade. The exact intensity. The exact shape. Impossible. The boy tilted his head. Are you okay, mister? Jae-Min couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't process what he was seeing. Because genetics didn't lie. Eyes like that specific, that rare, didn't appear randomly. They were inherited. Passed down. Undeniable. Ellie. Come on. Another voice. A girl. Same age. Running toward them. And when she got close, when she looked at him to see what was taking her brother so long, Jae-Min's heart stopped completely. Because she had them too. The same eyes. Both of them. Standing 3 feet away. Looking at him. Unaware they were staring at their father. For the first time in decades, since he'd watched his father kill a man for hesitating, Kang Jae-Min felt something close to fear. Not fear of danger. Fear of truth. Fear of consequences. Fear of the moment when everything you've convinced yourself of collapses. Ellie. Don't bother people. The voice came from behind him. Familiar. Impossible. He turned. Slowly. Already knowing what he'd see, but needing confirmation anyway. Amani. 20 feet away. Walking toward them. Older. Hair longer. Dressed in jeans and a sweater. Nothing like the woman he'd left in Busan. But unmistakably her. She saw him. Stopped mid-step. Went white. Not surprise. Recognition. Dread. And in that moment, Jae-Min understood. The children. The eyes. The 7 years since he'd walked away. The math that added up to a truth he'd never imagined. They're mine, he said. Barely a whisper. More to himself than to her. Amani moved fast. Grabbed both children's hands. Pulled them behind her. Protective. Instinctive.
Ellie. Aya.
Go wait by the elevator.
Now.
But now. They obeyed, confused, glancing back at the strange man who'd made their mother's voice shake. When they were far enough away, Amani looked at Jaemin, and her expression was everything he'd never let himself imagine. Not love, not longing, not hope. Fury. You don't get to do this. Her voice was low, controlled, shaking with rage. You don't get to show up now.
You don't get to look at them.
You don't get. They have my eyes. They have a lot of things you gave them without knowing.
But you don't get to claim them now.
You walked away. I didn't know, because you left too fast. Because you didn't let me tell you. Because you decided I was a complication you could erase. If I'd known, you still would have left. Because your empire mattered more. Your power. Your control. You chose that.
So you don't get this.
You don't get them. The twins were watching from near the elevator.
Confused. Scared.
Eli whispered something to Aya. She shook her head, held his hand tighter. Jaemin looked at them, really looked, saw himself, his features, his intensity, his genetics screaming across a hotel lobby, and saw something else.
Fear.
Not of him, but because of him. Because their mother was upset. Because something was wrong. Because the stranger had brought danger. How old? His voice was rough. 6. They're 6. 7 years ago. The last night. The night before he'd walked away. The night he'd held her. The night she'd tried to tell him something. You were pregnant. That night. When I left. You were already 3 weeks. I found out 2 days after you disappeared. Why didn't you tell me? Amani laughed.
Sharp.
Bitter. Tell you how? Your number died. Your office stonewalled me. You erased yourself so completely I couldn't have reached you if I tried. And I did try. For weeks. Until I realized you didn't want to be found.
So I stopped looking.
And I kept the secret. Because if your world was too dangerous for me, it was too dangerous for them. I would've what? Suddenly become a different person? Suddenly cared about something other than power? You made your choice. I made mine. Mine kept them safe. Safe from what? From you. From your enemies. From a father who'd rather walk away than risk feeling something. The words hit harder than any threat ever had. Because she wasn't wrong. 7 years ago, he'd chosen. Walked away. Convinced himself it was protection. Never looked back. And while he was building empires and destroying rivals and convincing himself loneliness was the cost of power, Amani was raising his children. Alone. 2 lives he'd never known existed. 2 consequences of a night he'd barely remembered because he'd trained himself not to look back. Until now. Until those eyes. Until proof that some things survive abandonment. I want. Jaemin started. I don't care what you want. Amani cut him off. You gave up that right. They're mine. You're just the stranger with their eyes. Jaemin didn't move. Couldn't move. 7 years of training himself not to react, not to show weakness, not to let anyone see behind the armor. All of it useless now. Because standing 20 feet away was the woman he'd convinced himself he'd buried. The woman he'd told himself was better off without him. The woman who was now pulling 2 children, his children, behind her like a shield. Amani had changed. Not drastically, but enough. Her hair was longer. Pulled back in a ponytail.
No makeup.
Jeans instead of the dresses she used to wear. Lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. Lines that came from stress. From raising children alone. From carrying weight she shouldn't have had to carry. But she was stronger too. He could see it in her posture. In the way she'd moved to protect the twins without hesitation. In the way she looked at him now, not with the softness he remembered, but with the hardness of someone who'd survived abandonment and come out the other side. Amani. Her name felt foreign. Like a word from a language he'd forgotten.
She didn't respond.
Just kept her hands on the children's shoulders. Keeping them close. Keeping them safe. From him. We need to talk. No, we don't. Those children are none of your business. They have my love, my protection,
My time.
my everything. What they don't have is you. And they're fine. We're fine. So whatever you think you're owed, you're not. Jaemin took a step forward. Amani took a step back. Don't. I just want to. I don't care what you want. I haven't cared for 7 years. You made your choice. Live with it. I didn't know. That's not my problem. You left. You disappeared. You made yourself unreachable. That was your choice. I dealt with the consequences. Alone. I'm not letting you walk back in now because you're suddenly curious. I'm not curious. He stopped. Didn't know how to finish. Shocked? Devastated? Terrified? All of it? The twins were watching. Eli whispered something to Aya. She shook her head. Both of them looked scared. Not of Jaemin, but of the situation. Of their mother's tension. Of the stranger who'd made everything wrong. You're scaring them, Amani said quietly. That's not. It doesn't matter what you intended. You're a stranger. And strangers who upset their mother are scary. So back away. Let us leave. Forget you saw us. I can't. Why not? You've been forgetting us for 7 years. I didn't know you existed. And whose fault is that? The question hung. Brutal. Accurate. Jaemin had no answer. Because it was his fault. All of it. Walking away. Changing his number. Making himself unreachable. Convincing himself it was protection when it was just cowardice. I would have helped, he said finally. If I'd known, would you? Really? Or would you have seen them as complications? Vulnerabilities? Leverage your enemies could use? You said loving you would ruin me. What would it have done to them? He had no answer. Because she was right. 7 years ago, he would have seen children as liabilities. Would have tried to control the situation. Would have maybe provided money, but never presents. Would have kept them at arm's length, because that's what he did with everything that threatened to matter. But now, standing here, looking at 2 children with his eyes, his features, his genetics proving he'd left something behind, something shifted. I'm different now. Amani laughed. Sharp. Disbelieving. Are you? Still alone? Still choosing power? Still walking away from anything that requires feeling? I didn't walk away from them. I didn't know about them. You walked away from me. And they came for me. So yes, you walked away from them. Before they existed, but you still walked. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. It wasn't fair when you left. It wasn't fair when I found out I was pregnant alone. It wasn't fair raising them without help. It wasn't fair answering questions about their father when I didn't have answers. None of this has been fair. But I survived it. We survived.
It.
Without you. So don't stand here asking for fairness now. Jaemin looked at the twins again. Eli was still staring. Assessing. Too serious for 6. Aya had her face buried in Amani's side. Not looking. Not wanting to see. What are their names? Jaemin asked quietly. Amani hesitated. Then, Aya. And Eli. Can I? No. I just want to talk to them. Absolutely not. You're a stranger. I don't let strangers talk to my children. I'm their father. You're a sperm donor. Being a father requires showing up. You don't get that title. The words cut deeper than any weapon. Jaemin had faced death threats, assassination attempts, betrayals. None hurt like this. Please. The word came out broken, unfamiliar. He couldn't remember the last time he'd said please and meant it. Amani looked at him, really looked, saw something that made her expression soften. Just slightly. Not forgiveness. Something sadder.
Pity.
You had 7 years.
You chose not to use them.
Don't ask me to give you more. Then she turned, took the twins' hands, walked toward the elevator. Jaemin stood frozen, watching them leave, watching his children disappear into an elevator, watching the doors close on a future he'd never known he'd lost. The lobby continued around him.
People. Noise.
Life. He stood in the center of it. Untouchable. Powerful. Alone. And for the first time in 7 years, Kang Jae-Min wondered if every choice he'd made had been wrong. Jae-Min did something he'd sworn never to do.
He followed them.
Not aggressively. Not threatening. Just followed. Up the elevator.
Down the hallway.
To room 847. He stood outside the door after closed, listening to muffled voices. Amani's.
Calm.
Reassuring. The children's.
Confused. Scared.
Who was that man, Mama? Eli's voice. Nobody important, but you were upset. I'm fine now. Let's get ready for dinner. He had eyes like us. Silence. Then Amani's voice. Quieter. I know. Is he, Eli? Please.
Not now.
Jae-Min stood there, hand raised to knock.
Couldn't do it.
Because what would he say? What right did he have to disrupt their evening? Their life? Their peace? He went back to his room. 37th floor.
Présidentielle suite.
Everything he'd built. Everything power bought. It felt like a tomb. He poured whiskey. Didn't drink it. Just stared at the glass and tried to process. 6 years. They were 6. Which meant Amani had been 3 weeks pregnant when he left. Had been trying to tell him. Had been standing in that doorway preparing to change his entire world. And he'd walked out. Spoke first. Faster. Cut her off. Erased himself before she could say the words that would have changed everything. His phone rang. His assistant. Sir, the merger documents are ready for review. Cancel it. Sir, cancel the merger. Cancel the meetings. Cancel everything. For how long? I don't know. Just cancel it. He hung up. Sat in the dark. At 11 p.m., his security called. Sir, there's a situation. The woman and children from earlier. We have their information. Hotel registration. Background. Would you like? No. Sir? I said no. Don't investigate them. Don't follow them. Don't do anything. That's an order. Understood. But Jae-Min couldn't sleep. Couldn't think about anything except those eyes. His eyes. Staring at him from faces he'd never imagined. At 2 a.m., he went back. Stood outside room 847 again. Listened. Silence now. They were sleeping.
His children.
Sleeping 15 feet away. Completely unaware their father was standing in a hallway having an identity crisis. At 6 a.m., he was still there, leaning against the wall. Exhausted. Destroyed. When the door opened, he straightened. Eli came out first. Saw him. Stopped. You're the man from yesterday. I am. Why are you standing outside our room? I wanted to talk to your mother. She doesn't want to talk to you. I know. Then why are you here? Good question. Why was he here? What was he hoping for? Because I made a mistake. A long time ago. And I'm trying to figure out how to fix it. What mistake? I walked away from someone I shouldn't have. Eli considered this with that too serious expression. My mama? Jae-Min's throat tightened. Yes. Were you mean to her? I thought I was protecting her.
But yes.
I was mean. You should apologize. I'm trying. Try harder. Then Amani appeared. Saw Jae-Min. Her expression went from surprise to furious in seconds.
Eli.
Inside.
Now.
But now.
Elioteid.
Amani stepped into the hallway. Closed the door behind her. Are you insane? You can't stand outside our room all night. I needed to. To what? Stalk us? Terrify my children? Prove you're exactly as dangerous as I've been protecting them from. I'm not dangerous to them. You're a stranger. Who appeared out of nowhere. Who upset me. Who's now lurking outside our door. How is that not dangerous? Because they're mine. The words came out desperate. Broken. Amani stepped closer. Voice low. Lethal. They're not yours. You don't get to claim them because genetics say so. Being a father is more than DNA. It's showing up. Being present. Answering questions at 2 a.m. about why the sky is blue. Holding them when they're scared. Teaching them to tie their shoes. Reading the same bedtime story 47 times because they love it. You haven't done any of that. So no. They're not yours. They're mine. I want to change that. Too late. It's not too late. I can. Can what? Suddenly become a different person? Suddenly care about something other than your empire? I've been watching your career. You're more powerful than ever. More ruthless. More untouchable. You really think there's room in that life for children? I'll make room. You couldn't make room 7 years ago. Why would now be different? Because now I know they exist. And that changes what? You still chose power. You're still the man who walks away. Only difference is now you know what you're walking away from. I'm not walking away. Then what are you doing? Jae-Min looked at her. Really looked. Saw the exhaustion. The fear. The fierce protection of a woman who'd raised 2 children alone. I'm trying to be someone different. Someone who stays. Words are easy. Actions matter. And your actions 7 years ago made it very clear where your priorities were. I was wrong.
Yes.
You were. And we survived your being wrong. Without you, we don't need you now. Maybe I need you. The admission came out raw. Unexpected. Amani stared at him. That's not my problem. You want redemption? You want to ease your guilt? That's on you. I'm not here to make you feel better about abandoning us. I didn't abandon you. I didn't know you abandoned me. They came from that abandonment.
So yes.
You abandoned them too. Before they existed. But you still did. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back 7 years. Sorry doesn't answer Eli's questions about why he doesn't have a dad. Sorry doesn't make Aya feel less different when other kids have fathers at school events. Sorry is just a word you're using to feel less guilty. She was right. About all of it. What can I do?
Leave. Let us live our lives.
Forget you saw us. I can't. Why not? Because they have my eyes. Amani's expression softened. Not forgiveness. Something sadder. They also have my strength. My resilience. My love. Your eyes didn't raise them. I did. So you don't get to claim them now because you recognize your own reflection. She went back inside.
Door closing.
Jae-Min stood alone. Again. The most powerful man in Seoul. Destroyed by 2 6-year-olds he'd never known existed. And a woman who'd survived abandonment and come out stronger. Everything he'd built. Everything he controlled. Everything he'd convinced himself mattered. Meant nothing. Because power can't buy back years. Money can't erase abandonment. Control can't force forgiveness. Some consequences can't be fixed. Only lived with. And Kang Jae-Min was finally understanding the cost of his choices. Jae-Min did the only thing he knew how to do. He offered money. 3 days after the lobby encounter, he found them at a park. Amani saw him coming. Stood immediately. Protective. I told you to leave us alone. I can't. Please. Just hear me what I have to offer. I don't want your money. It's not just money. It's protection. Security. The best schools. A future where they never want for anything. They already don't want for anything. They have love. Stability. Safety. Things you can't buy. I can give them more. Private education. Travel. Opportunities. Stop. Amani's voice was steel. You think that's what they need? Expensive things? You really don't understand anything. Eli was watching from the swings. Too far to hear. Close enough to sense tension. Aya had stopped playing. Standing behind a slide. Peeking out. Let me meet them. Properly. Let me try. Try what? To be a father? That's not something you try. That's something you are.
And you had 6 years to be that.
You chose not to. I didn't know. I know you didn't know. But you made choices that led to not knowing. You made yourself unreachable. You walked away. You chose power. Those were your choices. And choices have consequences. These are yours. She gestured to the twins. And they're doing fine without you. But I don't care what you want.
This isn't about you.
Jae-Min looked at the children. Eli had walked over. Standing between Jae-Min and Amani. Protective of his mother. 6 years old and already understanding when someone was a threat. Are you bothering my mom? Eli asked.
Direct.
Unafraid. Jae-Min knelt down. Eye level. I'm trying to talk to her.
About you.
And your sister.
Why?
Because I want to know you. Want to be part of your life.
Why?
The question was simple. Devastating. Because Jae-Min had no good answer. Because the truth, because you have my genetics, sounded hollow. Because I'm your father, wasn't earned. Because I abandoned your mother and now feel guilty, was accurate but cruel. Because I made a mistake. Jae-Min said finally. And I'm trying to fix it. What mistake? I wasn't there when you were born. When you were growing up. I should have been. And I wasn't. And I'm sorry. Eli considered this. My mama says sorry doesn't fix things. You have to do better. You're right. I'm trying to do better.
How?
Good question. How do you become a father to children who don't know you?
Who don't need you?
Who've survived 6 years without you? I don't know yet.
But I want to try.
If your mother lets me. Eli looked at Amani. What do you think, Mama? Amani's expression was complicated.
Hurt. Angry. Exhausted.
I think this man wasn't there when I needed him. When we needed him. I think he made choices that left us alone. I think he's very powerful and very rich, and used to getting what he wants.
But he can't have this.
Because this isn't about money or power. This is about time. And time is the one thing he can't buy back. So, he can't be our dad? He is your biological father. But being a dad, that's different. That requires earning it. And I don't know if he's capable of that. Jae-Min looked at her. Let me try.
Please. I'm asking.
Let me prove I can be different. And if you fail, if you walk away again, if you decide this is too hard or too complicated or threatens your precious empire, I won't. You said loving me would ruin me. Then you left. Your words don't mean much. Then judge me by my actions. Give me a chance to show you. Amani was quiet.
Long.
Finally, 1 month. You can see them. Supervised. In public places. With me present.
If they want to.
If they don't, you leave. If you miss one meeting, you're done. If you prioritize work over them once, you're done. If you hurt them in any way, I'll make sure you never see them again. Understood. Understood. She looked at Eli. What do you think? Want to get to know this man?
Eli fraquel.
Maybe. Does he like dinosaurs? Jae-Min had no idea. I can learn. Okay. We can try. Aya came over. Hiding behind Amani. Do I have
to?
No, baby. Only if you want to. Aya looked at Jae-Min, studied him with eyes too knowing. You made Mama sad. I did. I'm very sorry. Will you make her sad again? Honest question. Jae-Min wanted to say no. Wanted to promise. But Amani was right. Words meant nothing. I'm going to try very hard not to. That's not a promise.
No.
It's not. Because I don't want to promise something I might fail at. But I can promise I'll try. Every day. To be someone you're not afraid of. Aya considered this. Okay. But if you're mean, I'll tell Mama. That's fair. They left. Amani gave him her number. Told him to text. They'd arrange something. Jae-Min stood in the park watching them walk away. 3 people. A family. That existed without him. That had survived without him. That might possibly let him in. If he earned it. He'd conquered cities. Built empires. Destroyed rivals. None of it prepared him for this. For earning the trust of 2 6-year-olds. For proving to a woman he'd abandoned that he was capable of change. For becoming someone different than the man who'd walked away. That night, he called his assistant. Clear my schedule. Indefinitely. Sir, I have priorities. They come first now. What priorities? Family. He hung up. Sat in his hotel room. Googled how to be a good father. Read articles. Felt overwhelmed. Felt terrified. Felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Maybe. Possibly. If he didn't fail. Kang Jae-Min had built an empire. Now he had to build something harder. A relationship. With children who owed him nothing. with a woman who'd survived his absence, with consequences that had his eyes but not his trust. And for the first time in his life, he understood. You can conquer the world, control nations, destroy enemies, and still lose the only thing that mattered. But maybe, if you're willing to change, willing to try, willing to put down the armor and be vulnerable, you can earn it back.
Slowly.
Carefully. One dinosaur conversation at a time. If you made it this far, thank you, seriously. Here's what I want to know. Can you earn back what you abandoned? Is biology enough to be called a father, or do you have to earn that title? Comment earn it if you think he deserves a chance. Comment too late if some doors close forever. Where are you watching from? Have you ever had to earn back trust you destroyed? Subscribe if you haven't. These stories need you. Next week, she raised his daughter for 5 years. Then his wife showed up claiming the child was kidnapped. Until then, remember, power can conquer empires but can't buy back time. Genetics make you a parent, but presence makes you a father. And sometimes the most devastating truth is realizing what you lost while you thought you were winning. Consequences have his eyes. But trust? That has to be earned.